harassment and rape that was just running rampant on one of the universities in Michigan. And Diane Sawyer is doing the interview for the show that she's doing, and she asked the person from the campus that what he thought was contributing to this serious issue that was happening on these campuses. And she said, really not on just this campus, although it was rampant on this campus, but she said other campuses across America. And the respondent answered with this: I think there is a deep-rooted spiritual issue, Diane, that goes down to the heart of who we are. Diane Sawyer responded, and quickly responded, with this: hey, this is not the time to speculate with religious rhetoric. You know, quickly shut down the person that was getting to the heart of the issue and things, but it didn't agree with her philosophy on life or her perspective or her values, and so she quickly shut it down. But I've seen both in the culture, both in government and in private corporate businesses, at least to try to communicate with the generations of today this basic concept that we need to start being less selfish. That we need to be people that are considering our fellow man and looking for opportunities, and they've created opportunities to actually serve one another, to get our people to be less about themselves and more about their common humanity. Now, it might have some humanistic push and things to it, but it's there, and I'm seeing it there, and so they're realizing the issues. They're realizing the fallen shortness. They're realizing the brokenness. They just don't realize what is the healing power to come in. But how many have noticed, because it wasn't true when I was a high school student, but how many of, if you're high school students here, raise your hand if you're required to do community service hours. You have some community service hours? Because when I was in high school, we weren't required to do community service hours. But when I was talking to Campus Life kids, they were required to serve in the community. There was community service hours. And so that was just something we used to not have to do. But when I was both at Churchill and Willamette, the kids and in the leadership classes, things were required to do community service hours. My father-in-law worked with PGE, a public utility company in Portland, and they had team time. And they would receive team points in their work group for community service. And they would go to the beach, Seaside and Cannon Beach, and pick up garbage for the day. And it was part of their points that they would get for giving back to the community. Now, you've heard of people like Warren Buffett and others have given back millions to the community, and different corporations that will sponsor things and give help, and for young athletes and young scholars and different things that money goes back to. And so I'm seeing just more and more of a push, even from secular perspectives, of needs being met and to be less selfish and more about others. Now, I watched the NFL awards night just recently, and they gave out the Walter Payton Award. And you guys remember Walter Payton played for the Chicago Bears, a great running back, and just a phenomenal person. If you know, also he was a believer in Christ and left a legacy of service in the community. And so they named this award after them. And so the few weekends ago, when the Super Bowl was leading up to the Super Bowl, I watched the awards night. And the Walter Payton Man of the Year Award goes to the NFL player that gives most back to the community. And the player that was shared was a man named Anquan Boldin. And he's from the San Francisco 49ers, a guy that's gone all over the world, in Africa and Asia, getting food and supplies, medical care, food for the hungry over in those places. Also has helped built 150 bikes for kids in the San Francisco area who didn't have a bikes. Also provided tons and tons of scholarships to people that otherwise wouldn't be able to go to college if it wasn't for him and his foundation. So I just got a video clip from that awards night, because I thought, man, this is a man that knows about ministry and then learned it was a man of faith. I don't think just the humanistic traits are the answer to meeting the needs of humanity. So just, if we can run this video clip, if it's working, Jay.
I am joined on stage by my fellow Man of the Year recipients here tonight, and we are thrilled to welcome to this fraternity the 2015 Walter Payton NFL Man of the Year, Anquan Boldin.
Thank you. First off, I would like to thank the NFL and the Payton family, Brittany, Miss Connie, and Jared, for voting me in. I've had the chance over the last 2 years to get to know the Payton family. And what a great family. I love what they do in the community and how they carry on Walter Payton's legacy. I also like to thank Dan and Joanne of the 49ers for their tireless work and helping me do everything that I'm able to do through my foundation. I know I'm here receiving this award, but there should be a line of people standing alongside of me because my foundation doesn't work without them. So I like to thank my entire board for everything that they do, all the hours that they put in, and they do it all from the heart. None of them get paid. They do it because that's what they want to do. I like to thank my partner in crime, my backbone, my wife, who's been there since day one, helping me do everything that I need to. I played this game, just finished up my 13th season. And when I first got into the NFL, man, nobody can tell me anything. I was living life. I had achieved my dream of one day making it to the NFL. But I soon realized that's not what life is all about. I realized that my purpose in life wasn't to make it to the NFL and to score touchdowns. God put me on this earth for something much bigger than that. And I realize and understand what my purpose is now. And that's to honor God in everything I do. On the field, off the field. So, it's my prayer, my hope that, I can live out the rest of my life honoring God. I can help as many people as possible. And once again, I'd just like to say thank you to the NFL and to the Payton family for this tremendous honor.
I am joined on stage by my fellow Man of the Year recipients.
So something I just loved about that is again, I think that there's enough motivation from humanisms to say, I just really want to make a huge difference, just for the sake of making a huge difference. And Anquan, I think he just exemplifies that the messes on the planet, the needs that need to be met, the greatest motivation is Christ. Because when we look at his life and what he did on the cross, we can see that he compassionately, truly loved people. He cared about people. And I think that it shows that it exemplifies just in what we see around us is the motivation for serving people is Christ. If you take the lion's share of hospitals that have names belonging to Christian organizations, if you take the United Way in conjunction with MTV, sent 100 college students nationwide when they were collecting these students to go down there to help with disaster relief after hurricanes. But then Campus Crusade for Christ came along and sent 7,000 kids down there to clean up the mess of Hurricane Katrina. You can see the difference in motivation makes it a huge result difference when it's motivated by Christ. I think it's wonderful in the modern church of today that there's a huge movement amongst even in our youngest church membership to win the world to Christ by ministering to its needs. We're seeing that as an avenue in which to reach people for Christ. But one of the hesitancies or things that are just concerned about a little bit is Andy Crouch, who's coming to Eugene this Wednesday, this whole week, but he's speaking in chapel at NCU on Wednesday, and then he's going to speak Wednesday evening at 6 down there at the chapel if you're interested in a national author who wrote Culture, Creating Culture and Playing God. He writes, meeting the physical needs of the poor wins the attention and affirmation from a watching world. Naming the spiritual poverty of a world enthralled to false gods provokes defensiveness and derision from those who not even believe there is a God. Our secular neighbors care, many like never before, about relieving human need, and more of them than ever before are indifferent or hostile to the idea that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and the one who meets the deepest human need. In short, working for justice is cool, proclaiming the gospel is not. So Andy Crouch says something that I think is very important as we talk about ministry and the difference that we really want to make in this world, and that is that the biggest difference you can make is an eternal difference. The biggest difference you can make is to share about the love of Jesus Christ with somebody. Because if you don't package the message of meeting needs and love without the name of Christ, I compare that to just rearranging the chairs and the furniture on the Titanic as it's going down. To help people feel a little more comfortable, to help relieve a little needs, to make sure everybody's got a life jacket on that is fully clothed and fully fed as they're going down underneath the Arctic Sea. So I think as we meet needs, I think we need to listen to Andy here and know that our love for people needs to be packaged with the gospel. To meet needs that go beyond just the worldly needs, just the needs of the here and there, or of what people are facing today, the tangible needs. And I like that the church is leading the charge against abortion and saying we're pro-life, and creating more and more adoption options and pregnancy resource centers to meet the needs of young, unprepared moms, or fighting sex trafficking, or giving help in the worldwide refugee crisis that's going on in Syria and other places in the Middle East, dispersing food, water, Doctors Without Borders giving medical help to diseased all over the world in amazing ways. People are doing their part of the church mission of going. And it's the mission of our church to gather and then grow and then to go. And they're accomplishing that, but it's got to be go in the love of Christ, with the message of Christ going with it. And so here it is. God lays out for us what it takes to really make the difference in this world. And I hope that it's obvious to you that it starts by knowing Him and understanding His plan for ministry. And so Anquan Boldin would understand this first message, or this first point, is that we need to understand we were called and equipped to make a difference. Did you know that you're called and equipped to make a difference? God's called you. And He not only has called you, but He's equipped you. He's made you in a special way, unique. He's shaped you. He's designed you. He's put you together with certain gifts and abilities, a certain heart, certain personalities, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. The skills and compassions that He's given you are all designed and you're equipped to make a difference. Ephesians 2:10 says this, "For we are God's handiwork." For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And you are God's handiwork. Some of your translations say we are God's workmanship. We are God's masterpieces. We are God's creation, and He's created us not just to be here, but to go and do something. And that something is to bring healing and to do good works, to minister to people. And that's why He didn't just save us and then call us right up to heaven. He saved us so we could have a testimony and so we could work amongst those that do not yet know Christ, that we can meet needs, that we can bring encouragement to people. And the mind-blowing thing is God prepared this in advance for us to do. Now, some of those know Ephesians 1:4, where He called us out and predestined us. He knew those that would even be saved. He knew those who would even respond to Him before the world even was. Is mind-blowing, but did you know not only did He call you out and save you, but He also had a plan for your life. He also already knew the gifts you would have, the abilities you would have in order to bring some healing to humanity. I remember a commercial that had a blue ocean over the entire screen, and slowly and profoundly a big Navy ship steadily made its way across the screen, and then a dignified, deep voice came on and said, "The United States Navy, a force in the world for good." I remember after seeing that commercial for the first time, I thought, tell Kelly, I want to sign up for the Navy. I want to be a force for good, but I didn't need to sign up because the greatest force on the planet for good is the church. We're to bring good to the world, the whole world, no matter what country or ethnic background or who you are or economic status. We get to be part of the greatest force on the planet for good, the body of Christ. And don't estimate here or play down the word handiwork. I think sometimes we play down the different gifts in other people, and I think it's just an insult to God. God's made somebody not just good at something, but it's a handiwork. It's very good. God has made you and I experts at some category or some skill or something in life that we can do that can bring honor to God in a way because it's very well done. He didn't make us to do something just mediocre or half-hearted or half-passioned into something. His handiwork means He did it, and He did it darn good. You and I were designed to do something, and we're going to do it very well, and it's going to bring some credit to God, our Creator, who made us that way. Many people choose to selfishly use those for their own good, and to build up themselves and to just spend more and more with the promotions they make and the things that they make. But God has designed us to look outside of ourselves. I sometimes it's just the idea that people are just made differently to bring God glory in different ways. I remember thinking about my cousin Mary Ann. She was adopted from my aunt and uncle. And she's adopted. She was Native American. And I remember just watching Mary Ann grow up and things like, wonder what God has for her. Is he just kind of a different cousins, people who grow up? Wonder what they'll do when they grow up. And Mary Ann, from her background, is using something from her background. She's in Colorado right now, and her home is filled with these weaving, I don't even know what they call them, but things in which you weave together saddle blankets for high-bred horses, and so very expensive horses. And so her house is full of these things. And you think, wow, great. She's probably just, doing something. But she gets thousands of dollars for each blanket that she makes. As people with these high-bred horses care a whole lot about what the blanket looks like and how long it's going to last, and it's not hurting the horse in any way. There's a proper fit. And so thousands of dollars for each blanket she makes, and she's using this unique thing to glorify God. You think, wow, how does that work? Well, she's uniquely made. And the beauty of the things, even as she's developing to meet those needs, every kind of work can be used to glorify God. This week I was thinking some about Luke Jackson, who is a coach in the former college that I used to play basketball at. And Luke Jackson, because he was a former Duck standout basketball player at the U of O, and it was Luke and Luke. You saw all the billboards around, and Luke Jackson got a chance to go to the NBA. And when I was hearing his story, I was just heartbroken, because his story was he was going to go to the NBA, and he even got the top 1% of the top 1% of the top 1% who gets to go to the NBA, who played basketball in high school or whatever, and he gets there, but he never gets to play a single day because he has a career-ending injury. And not only that, he turned down the $12 million insurance plan on his body as to whether he was going to get hurt, and he was not able to play. But he said in those opportunities while he was there, practicing with the NBA before the season started, before he got hurt, he's able to even talk to other NBA players like Shaquille O'Neal and Alonzo Mourning, and some of the others that were having serious relational difficulties, some in their marriages, some were broken, some were having drug addictions, some having alcohol abuse, and he was able to bring Christ into their life of someone in the NBA. And I thought, man, that guy, God had a design, God had a plan for him to make a difference, and he was planted there in order to minister to people in the NBA. Now, Luke Jackson, I was just thinking of him this week, because his now coaching, using his skills to coach NCU's basketball team, who got their first ever league championship, and they got an automatic berth at NAA national championship tournament. And so I've been just watching that and watching him go through that, and I'm just excited. He's using God's gifts that he's given him, even athletics. He's like, oh, athletics, a bunch of jocks going out there having fun, playing basketball. How could that ever be all that glorifying to God? Well, just look at what's happening there. Right after their league championship game against Southern Oregon University, just on Friday night, the team gathered around the entire gym, praying together and giving God glory for who he is. I think, what other universities are doing that? An entire student body comes around the entire circles, entire gym to pray and lift up the name of the Lord. There's people that have beautiful hair. I've known Christians that have had beautiful, just hair. God's given them beautiful hair, and they've cut off some of that hair to make products of hair for cancer patients who have lost all their hair from chemotherapy. And they feel like that's glorifying to God, and they're meeting this need, and they're saying, why I'm doing this? Because I love the Lord, and so I want to meet this need in your life. I like Melissa Stock, another person that we've known around here for years that's overseas right now meeting needs. And what she was doing, I used to get a chance and opportunity to see the fruits of her labor. She would use the church's kitchen to make her little cupcakes. And she had her name of the cupcakes. I can remember the name of her business or things, but she was working out of our church kitchen for a while, and I'd be in my office and just smelling the aroma down the hallway, and thinking, man, I'd like to go in there and steal some of those cupcakes, or different things pastors do. And But she's using those cupcakes overseas now. She took a cupcake business here in the United States that she was making money for weddings and receptions and things, took it overseas to Southeast Asia, and is now teaching young girls how to make cupcakes for themselves and start their own businesses to get out of the sex trafficking trade. And so they now have these jobs, and they now have their own business, and they now have their own way of making an income and a living, and they've been able to escape out of the sex trafficking trade. She used something we think, wow, good for her. She's baking cupcakes. She thought, I'm going to go clear halfway around the world to glorify the Lord with how He's made me and shaped me and given me something I know how to do. I'm going to share it with others. Don't underestimate or play down ways God has specifically shaped you or gifted you or designed you that's not yet being used for the glory of God. Anquan Mullen, even a player, he realized his job is not just to score touchdowns. His job was not just the dream of sometimes we just get in the job or we get the promotion. We think, I've arrived. And luckily for Mr. Bolden, he understands that's just the beginning. That was just the platform to do what God really has him doing. Years back, a movie won an award. It had Matt Damon in it and Robin Williams in it and Ben Affleck. I hesitate to tell you the name because I don't want you to watch it because it was just laced with profanity and things. I want to be the pastor that made you a stumbling block on the language in it. But it was called Good Will Hunting, and it won an award and things. So the message of it was so good. Matt Damon's character, a kid that was abused, came from the rough part of town. Was kind of still, as Ben Affleck and him, they get in some fights, even in the movie and things. And so he's getting some counsel from Robin Williams, the psychologist or a counselor that's trying to counsel this young, wayward young man. But he's got a gift. Matt Damon's character has a gift, and that is with math. And he's working as a janitor at MIT. And MIT, there's a professor that puts a math problem, supposed to be just completely unable to solve on the board. And he puts it on the board for students to solve. No one can solve it and things. Matt Damon solves it at night while he's doing his custodial job, and it's no sweat. And the professor's, of course, trying to figure out who did this and figures out it's Matt Damon, has conversations with him, wants him to move up in some math jobs and high-caliber jobs and things. And Matt Damon, one time, is with Ben Affleck. He says, it's no big deal. This thing, I don't want to do that. And Ben Affleck and Matt Damon currently are these jobs during the day where they're using a sledgehammer and they're just knocking things down. They're working as demolitionists. And Ben Affleck is talking to Matt Damon. Matt Damon says, if it's a gift, it's no big deal. And Ben Affleck looks at him and goes, it is a big deal. It does matter. There's people like me and naming other friends that are with them and said, love to have a gift like that. Love to have the opportunities you have. And you owe it to us to use that gift to benefit others. And he gets it for the first time. And Ben Affleck kind of goes on to say, each day I pick, Matt Damon's character doesn't even drive. I don't even know if he has his license or whatever. So Ben Affleck picks him up for work in the morning and he says, you know what, I just wish more than anything, I can't wait till the day, I dream about a time I come to your door and I knock on the door for work in the morning and you're not there. Because you've moved on to use your gift. You've moved on to how you're made to use what you have for the benefit of others. It does matter. And the movie kind of ends with Ben Affleck's character coming up and knocking on the door, and finally Matt Damon is not there, and kind of a smirky smile comes across Affleck's face. It's like, and to me, I can just sense the same smile from the Lord every time one of His children and every time one of His believers finally leaves the dormant gifts of I just kind of, you are using gifts for themselves and things, and says, I'm here for a deeper reason. I've captured the vision of why I'm here, and I'm going to get into that and start doing that because it matters. We were made and equipped to make a difference, and we have a calling on our life that goes way beyond the occupations that you're currently in. At the same time, the disciples, they made the mistake we often make today, that they thought Jesus' ability to use them to make a difference was based on who they were or what they knew, what status, what prestige. The disciples, they kind of would even compete with each other and want to be something because they felt like God would use them if they were really something, and didn't realize that each one of them has gifts. Each one of them was given something by God and shaped in a way that could be used for the kingdom. Each one of us are experts in some field. Each one of us can do some things. We say, wow, I don't know where that came from. Well, it's just a gift. Well, the disciples made a mistake of thinking it just had sometimes, or that Jesus' ability to use them to make a difference was more about what they knew, or who they were in some ways, as far as status and prestige. And so the second thing I want you to know is we need to understand Jesus will be able to use us to make a difference based on how open we are to servanthood. There's enough people that have all kinds of giftedness and great strengths and things they can do that never use it for the kingdom of God. There's a lot of people that use those things for other purposes, even sometimes negative purposes. Sometimes the devil is using some people in ways, using their gifts to actually blaspheme God. All kinds of people, maybe in Hollywood, other places that just have all kinds of great gifts to put together movies and ways and things and present a message, but it's a terrible message. And there's Christians many times just waiting, well, I don't know if I have the right stuff. Well, we need to understand that Jesus is really concerned in making a difference out of us based on how open we are to being a willing servant. The idea of servanthood. A lot of us will say, want to be considered servants, but no one wants to be treated like one. Well, Matthew 10:42 through 44, the disciples have just got done arguing about who's the greatest in the kingdom of God. Like, hey, I'm greater. No, I'm greater. No, Jesus will use me the most. I can teach the Bible the best. No, you can't. Well, I'm the best evangelist. Jesus is going to use me to really build this thing, get this ship going. I'm going to be good at this. No. And so that's where the disciples were this time. And then Jesus calls them together in verse 42. Jesus called them together and said, that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them, but not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great amongst you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. God actually deliberately doesn't choose to use the powerful, the ones who know everything with the best world pedigree. Sometimes you're wondering, how come we can't, this is an election year and you're just kind of looking for the person, like, who would be a good message for Christ? Who would be a good person to share the gospel and just really stand up for righteousness? And you're kind of like, I don't see any. Where'd those people go? Well, a lot of times the powerful, a lot of times the ones that had the pedigree, a lot of times the people that have the money to actually be in an election aren't the people that God's choosing to make the biggest differences in the world. Some of you don't believe me. Maybe it was, look at some of the people God used. One person compiled an unflattering list of the people God chose to use. Moses stuttered. David's armor didn't fit, too small. Hosea's wife was a prostitute, kind of a downer. Jacob was a liar. David had an affair. Solomon was too rich. Abraham was too old. David was too young. Timothy had ulcers. Peter was afraid of death. Lazarus was dead. John was self-righteous. Jesus was too poor. Naomi was a widow. John Mark rejected by Paul because he's a quitter. Paul was a murderer. So was Moses. Jonah ran from God. Miriam was a gossip and a bigot. Gideon and Thomas both doubted. Jeremiah was depressed and suicidal. Elijah was burned out. Martha was a worrywart, a busybody. Samson had long hair. Noah got drunk. And I mentioned that Moses had a short fuse, and so did Peter, and so did Paul, and a lot of folks. You get the idea looking at the list of people that were big and high and mighty in God's army and things, and people read about in Bible characters. You see what qualifies you is not what you know. What qualifies is who you know. These people got to make a difference for eternity, that we're still talking about it, and things are 2,000 years old, and more so, those in the Old Testament characters, because of who they knew. They knew Jehovah. They knew the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who's making a difference in our lives today through the power of the Holy Spirit and gives us the ability to make differences, not because of our pedigree, not because we deserve to, not because of how good we are, but because we're willing to humbly take an attitude of servanthood and be used by the Creator of the universe. 1 Corinthians 1:27 through 29 just backs us up. It says, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of the world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him." Do you know we have no reason to boast at all? And I think that's why God used the people that he used, so they would maybe be receptive, be humble, be open to servanthood, instead of the high and mighty, instead of the ones that are bragging about all they can do and say and have. And it says God just actually spoils and makes foolish the things and shames the things of the wise. Their plans don't always work out because the things of the weak of the world shame the strong. How many have heard things like the banks are too big to fail? Oh, we're too big. How many of you heard, this ship is unsinkable? How many of you heard, that would be an upset that could never happen? How many of you lived back in the day, you may have heard that Rome will live on forever? That's what the Caesars used to say. How many of you heard America will always be a superpower? It's honestly times like where we're living in when I think of quotes like Ronald Reagan, who said, a nation not under God is a nation who's gone under. So when it comes to even our Bible study leaders and our deacons and shepherds, the Bible says, do not be hasty in the laying on of hands. Basically, don't be hasty in choosing who your leaders are, because you're looking for leaders, you're looking for people in the church to serve that have truly a humble, God-fearing, God-revering servant's heart, that aren't afraid or unwilling to serve the most delicate, not unwilling to serve those who need it the most. I remember Jim Womack, the senior, who is the previous president at NCU, in which I graduated from, and he in his address to our graduating class said, "Why is it in life you will find that the fool is always cocksure and the wise man doubts himself?" In seminary, there was a crop of us ready to graduate with our master's degrees in theology and things and divinity, and we gave our final thesis to be turned in and gave our final messages to our classmates and professors. And before many of us were going to be sent out to the world with dreams of changing the world for Christ. And I specifically remember one guy who could just articulate things in just amazing ways. He never had to go to his notes. He just could speak so eloquently and powerfully. There was times where he would just share the gospel in ways, with a group of seminary students, we were ready to raise our hands and receive Christ again, just because he was just a huge, just powerful message. We're like, I'm moved that God is truly speaking through this man. And he would move right from that part of the platform in which he was speaking to our class and move over and pick up his guitar and start strumming out the most powerful worship song. And he had this booming singing voice. And I would just get chills by the end of his song, and it's like, man, I wish I could preach like that. I wish I could sing like that. I wish I could play an instrument like that. I wish I could be like that guy. And I think each of us wanted to aspire to be something like that. I remember thinking, I hope this guy never leaves the Northwest. I hope the South doesn't gobble up this guy and bring him down to Southern churches. I already have enough churches down there, or Midwest. I hope this guy's used by God in the Midwest. And I followed the guys a couple of years after graduation. He did stay here in the Northwest. But within a couple of years of graduation, his wife left him. And he had to step down from the church that he was ministering in. And I remember thinking, man, I don't know what happened or who was at fault or anything. I just know that it's not how I would have thought that would have turned out for that guy. I'm thinking, why? Well, I think it's because we kind of hold people up basically by how they can perform, how they can articulate, how talented they are, how driven they are, how highly, and this is not what the Lord looks at. The Lord looks, how willing are you to make a difference? He's already equipped you, made you able to do the things that He's called you to do. You've been called and you've been equipped, and now it's up to us to have the attitude of a servant. Now, Christians still today try to distinguish themselves from others as greater or deeper, more knowledgeable. In individuals, you see the same micro-criticisms as you see of the church. Like, oh, that's a big church. Lots of people there. They're probably watering down the gospel. Probably not very deep. Probably a mile wide, an inch deep. And, oh, that's a small church. They must not be challenging the people with the real meat of the gospel, because otherwise it would be growing. All living things grow, and so certainly that church needs to just be growing in things, and it's not, and so they're insignificant and probably not preaching the gospel well either. And then so in our Christian lives, when it comes to discipleship and things, we think, well, I think I can teach that a little better, or I think I'm a little deeper, I can minister, and so we're just kind of distinguishing ourselves many times how we distinguish churches on who's deeper, who's greater, who's a little bit more eloquent, who will really challenge people, who can't. What if we distinguished ourselves from each other more by the amount we served one another? What if we did what the Bible has said? It says, just outdo one another in loving each other. It says, if you're going to compete in outdoing one another in love for each other. These are types of people Jesus wants to really make a difference with. The third point I want to make is Jesus wants to make a difference with those who are going to be there. For the people that are going to show up. I saw on a contractor's van the other day, it was the name of the business, and then under it, in quotes, it said, "We show up." And I thought, well, the only reason I can think of a contractor advertising that is there might be a lot of contractors that don't. And so, hey, we're just distinguishing ourselves as we're going to be the people that are going to be there. And I've had a few experiences where I'm trying to find somebody to do the work that I want them to, and some are like, yeah, we don't want to do that. Or you can tell they don't want to do it because they put such a high price on it. It's like, well, we'll do it, but you're going to pay this much because we really don't want to. It's a dirty or ugly job, or crawling underneath the house, or those things. Well, these guys just say on there, we show up. And that's who Jesus is looking at. Jesus is looking for a few people who are going to be there. Because the reason why is because Jesus was going to be there for us. He was there for us. He went to the cross for us. He came and dwelt amongst us. The creator of the entire universe, who created all of mankind, showed up for us. Hung out on the planet for 3 years so we'd know the very ins and outs, character of God. Personal revelation is what God is like. And his grave is not here on this planet because he arose to show he had competence even over death, but he wanted to be here so we could say, hey, he showed up. Philippians 2:5-11, here's just some character of Christ. In your relationship with one another. So we can just say in our marriages and our friendships and our work lives, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature of God, means he was a big thing, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant and being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven, on earth, and under earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. See, Jesus was big time, but he came to serve us. As his followers, shouldn't one of the key attributes of people saying, yeah, those people go to church, you can tell because they came to serve us. Those people go out of their way to take care of people's needs. That must be some Christians. He humbled himself to be there for us, to serve. Showing up for us is a good thing. It's an attitude. We should have the same attitude of Christ. Former quarterback John Brody, he was for the San Francisco 49ers. He was being asked by his football team to hold the ball for the kicker for both PATs and field goals, so the point after touchdowns and the field goals. And he was asked by a sports reporter, Brody, why with $1 million arm, you're $1 million player, why should you have to hold the ball for field goals and extra points after touchdown? Well, said Brody, if I didn't, it would fall over. And Brody basically understood that the value to his team was being there. There's value in the team in being there. It was in holding the ball so it didn't fall over. It was doing what needed to be done so the team could succeed. This type of person Jesus is looking for. We might think Jesus is looking for this and that. I think Jesus is looking for someone just to carry the ball. He's already gifted you. He's already called you. Now he's looking for the kind of servant that'll do that. He's looking for those that are going to be there. What kind of people hold the ball up for Jesus? People that are going to be there for others. Newsweek ran an article sometime back about street gangs. And it told a story of a Pentecostal preacher who was trying to reach out to some of the slums and some of the ghetto kids that were involved in these places. And when he first moved to the neighborhood, he went to Harvard. A Pentecostal pastor went to Harvard, and he was transplanted into the ghettos to try and reach them. And he sought out a drug dealer, local drug dealer named Selvin. And he asked him why he was so successful in dragging people into that lifestyle. And the guy gave Rivers, a Pentecostal preacher, a lesson in why God was losing to gangs in the battle for souls of inner city kids. Selvin explained to him, I'm there when Johnny goes out for a loaf of bread that Mama asks him to go get. I'm there and you're not. And so I win and you lose, because it's all about being there. Now that's just a tragic example, I think. You know, the drug dealer is like, I'm there for the kids. Getting them hooked early, getting them doing illegal activities early. But you know, just the thing that the church should be about is like, you know, we want to be there. When kids are whatever's happening in this world, we want to be there on the lines where people are hurting, where kids are hurting. That's why at the church we want to build and enlarge bigger leadership teams. That's why we're looking for more deacons. You're wondering, why are they getting more deacons? Why are they getting more shepherds? Why are they more and more teachers? Because each of those people we feel are building teams themselves. It's going to take the whole church body to be there for people. No one's calling the pastors that much. No one's calling, you know, the different deacons and shepherds all the time. They're calling a friend. And we're hoping and praying that that friend is a spiritual person that loves Jesus, that's able to bring the gospel to him as well as meet the need. Jesus tells a story about the time of judgment at the end times. He describes the actions of people that are his. They didn't do these things to earn salvation. They did these things because of their salvation. So we need to get that straight. We're saved by grace in him alone. But Matthew 25, 31 through 40, let me read that. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. And all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. People that responded and loved him he'll put on his right. The goats, people that rejected him, on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger, invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and to go and visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. It's like, wow. I mean, that's just good, right? That's convicting right there to take inventory. Now I'm thankful that God's grace is what saved me. I'm thankful I'm saved by his grace. But I'm a little bit convicted. I'm thinking, I go through my mind right away, who's the last person that was sick that I visited? And, you know, and was it just because it was a job or something? Or is this because who's the last person I helped clothe? Who's the last person in prison that I'd go visit? And, you know, maybe for pastors and things, these are things a little more likely to do, but the Lord's not talking to pastors here. The Lord's talking to his church. Now, thankful, you know, and I need to celebrate rather than putting guilt on people. Hopefully conviction, but not guilt. But hopefully we'll look and say, you know, the church has done those things, a lot of those things. You know, through either bags of love or the money going to the Eugene Mission, or giving money through the cooperative program to all over places around the world that are just outstanding, and you've been part of that, and all your gifts go to that. And sometimes we write a check to different places and things. But when's the last time, the Lord asks, when's the last time you've gone to clothe the person, to feed the person? I mean, Sometimes I think we're overwhelmed by the amount of needs. We're overwhelmed by so much that we choose to do nothing because there's just too many needs. Instead of doing nothing at all, or doing something, we do nothing. We might be a little bit more like this writer who kind of wrote his thesis a little bit on the church. He says, I was hungry and you formed a humanities club and discussed my hunger. I was in prison and you crept off quietly to your chapel and prayed for my release. I was naked and in your mind you debated the morality of my appearance. I was sick and you knelt and thanked God for your health. I was homeless and you preached to me of the spiritual shelter of the love of God. I was lonely and you left me alone to pray for me. You seem so close to God, but I'm still very hungry, lonely, and cold. Now that sounds pretty harsh in some ways, and I think at that point we remember that we are the church of God because of what he did for us, and we have all fallen short. We have all not done all of our part or what we could do and could be, but God's grace covers us even in that. But what if we were just like that Matthew 25 verses where each of us are going and helping a little bit with the hungry, not being Superman and flying all over the world, but in our sphere of influence, the people in our care and the people that we work with, the people in our neighborhoods, the people in the needs that we know, that's where we can be Christ to them. That's being the church. Outside the walls of this church, you're being the church. There's some here that maybe you don't yet have a relationship with Christ. I just invite you to consider inviting him in to your life and loving him because he brings eternity to you. That's the invitation this morning. We just stand during this time of invitation. I'm going to just be in the back and to greet you, receive you, to pray with you. Questions about the message this morning or the church or about ministry, how to get involved. We'd love to talk to you.